welcome to this catch-up. I've got a very special guest with me today. If you want to introduce yourself, yeah.
So my name is Alastair Cooke, and my day job is teaching VMware training courses. I'm a contractor based in New Zealand, and I teach a fair amount of training in New Zealand. But of course, that's not really why Craig has wanted to have a catch-up with me. My sort of community involvement is more what we're about, and so the last year and a half, I've been running the APAC Virtualization podcast, which is the primary virtualization-related podcast that runs in the Australia, New Zealand, and getting some attention up through Southeast Asia as well. And that's a fortnightly podcast talking about something virtualization-related. And of course, Craig knows this very well because for the last 2 months, he's been running the podcast because I've been very busy with some other activities as well.
You've been a very busy man.
I have.
You are the 28 hours a day man, I think.
Yeah, some days it's been more than 28 hours in the day. Because the V Brown Bag, which if you look very closely, I'm branded with V Brown Bag. This is another podcast that I've got involved in this year that sort of combines the two of the APAC Virtualization podcast being very generic and my day job being training. Or V Brown Bag is a podcast that's about helping people to get more skills around VMware products to get VMware certification. So there's a good connection between the podcast and my day job working in training. And this year we've absolutely exploded. The V Brown Bag has seriously taken off. So I started the APAC edition where we looked at the vCatchup 5 data center design certification. We started covering the entire blueprint for that exam over a series of podcasts. We actually started running them before the exam had been released, and because some of us were on the beta program for the exam, we had the blueprint and we knew what to study for. And that was my first quarter of the year, taken up evenings and working on that. And of course, then at the two Vmworlds, we've run the professional VMware V Brown Bag Tech Talks, which is where originally people whose sessions for VMworld didn't get accepted, so there were 1,800 proposed sessions and 200 accepted. So there were a few people who were a little bitter about this. So we gave them a forum. The VMware Communities team came on board and offered us up a stage, very like the stage we're sitting on now, but with a lot more equipment around it. And we got, across the two VMworlds, we got about 50 people got to stand up and present something community-generated technical content.
And some very impressive people at that as well. And, some really good names there as well.
In addition to lots of people who you didn't know who had something to say, and there are a huge number of people that you've never heard of who have something useful to say. We got a lot of the big names were very happy to come up and have a session. Some of them actually were really cool because they said, I don't want to take up a session and stop somebody less well known from getting a session in. And some of these guys would then say, well, actually, we've got a gap in the schedule, can you come in? And Scott Lowe, really well known, really nice guy. I actually walked up to him and said, I've got a gap in my schedule in half an hour. Can you put something together for me and present for 10 minutes?
As Scott can, yeah.
And Scott did. It was good.
Good on him,
So that sort of has meant that I've been to two VMworlds this year, and the Barcelona one was awesome, but it was at such short notice and such chaotically organised. It really was quite tiring. And then the third thing that's been completely occupying me, as you've already talked with my partner in crime on that, is the Auto Lab, one of my partners in crime. The Auto Lab is sort of supplements my thoughts that hands-on learning, actually using the products, is the way that we as geeks tend to learn. And the Auto Lab is aimed at making it easy for you to build your own lab without having to spend all of your time building Windows and installing patches and installing SQL when you actually want to learn about vSphere and vCenter. And there's a lot of work getting it to the point where you don't have a lot of work to do as the user of the Auto Lab, and that's been making me busy. One of the really cool things about the Auto Lab, though, is that the initial build was all my work, but then we've got a whole heap of other people who have been involved. So I needed some good documentation on how to make the Auto Lab work under Fusion, and James Bowling, vCentral on Twitter, posted up, here's the process I had to go through. So I said, can you document that for me, and I'll put it back into my deployment guide. And then one of my V Brown Bag colleagues said I need to get vCloud into AutoLab, and so Damien Carlson wrote that.
Wow,
Then more locally, the version 5.1 AutoLab that we're working on at the moment, when we have some time not at conferences, locally Grand Orchard did most of the work of actually getting all of the 5.1 components into AutoLab. So whilst I started the thing, the community has rallied around it, seen value and enhanced it, and that's one of the things I really like about the virtualization community.
Yeah, you're a bit of a focus, mate. I have to say, there's a lot going on around you at the moment.
Well, what happens is if you're prepared to put the time in and you see things that are valuable, there's lots of places you can put some time in. I don't recommend that everybody go out and dedicate their lives and wreck their marriages to take part in the community. I know if I push too much further, I'm going to have to spend quite a lot of time making it up to my wife. But yeah, there's quite an impact to be made. One of my most fun things for the vForum, heading on to our sort of experiences of vForum, is that this is the second year that I've run a party for the community. So I went to Vmworld last year for the first time. Went to we're all badged. Went to the VM Underground party. I didn't manage to get a ticket, but I happened to hook up with somebody else who got me in, and thought, this is just so cool. I went to two really cool parties there, and one was VM Underground, another one was run by Christopher Cooke, who's CXI on Twitter. And they were parties whose basic concept was to get people together so they could talk. So the music wasn't intrusive. There was sponsored beer provided, but it was all about conversation.
There's nothing like beer to spark conversation, is there?
It does tend to make the conversations interesting. So last year and then this year again, I've organised VM Down Underground, which is the same concept, but before vForum Sydney. Really happily got sponsorship on it, so NetApp and Veeam are the guys we say thank you very much for really supporting all of the community activities. And we had around 80 people on Tuesday night. Packed into a small space because nobody wanted to be in the big empty space. They all wanted to be close to one another so you could talk.
I did notice that demographic going on there.
I think it was partly also because the bar was out in the air where everybody was.
Yeah, look, and I had the privilege to be on the door. So
you did.
If your name wasn't down, you wasn't coming in. I think you were coming in anyway. I think So.
I think if you knew what it was that was going on upstairs, you got to come along.
Yeah, cool. So look, I've got about 5 or 6 questions for you, Alastair. Yeah, so I'll crack into some of those. You've kind of covered some of them a little bit already, but they're there, and we'll get into them. Yeah. So look, tell me about your vForum experiences, past and present, and I'd also like to know about why you're attending this year as well. What you're hoping to get out of it, you know?
Well, I've been coming to Sydney for vForum since before it existed. I didn't go to the original, the inaugural one was a TSX, the Technology Solutions Exchange. The very first one I understand I missed. I went to the second one, which was 200 people, and it was there was only ever one thing at a time happening, and there was no solutions exchange. And that was in 2007, I believe, early 2007. And I've just seen this thing get larger and larger in the last 5 years.
Because it used to be a regional thing, didn't it? I remember going to a vForum in Melbourne, you know, so...
This had different locations and different formats, and it's grown up here. I've been to all of the events since 2007 in Sydney. There was a bit of a gap when they weren't quite sure what they were doing, but it's just grown and grown as the number of people who are using VMware products in the region has grown. For me, the big thing I get out of both vForum and also VMworld is the social connection. So I mostly come to these events to see people. And that's a lot of why I'm involved in social media as well, is that I actually like the people who work with virtualization. I would go out and drink with them every week if I could, but I don't live in a place where you can. As a trainer, I travel a lot for my work. I'm in one city. Next week I'm in Auckland. I'm in Wellington. I can't even remember where I'm going. My wife doesn't know where I'm going. She just knows I'm away. The next week I'm in Melbourne. The week after that I'm in Auckland. The week after that I'm in Adelaide. It's really hard to keep friendships in places along that. So for me, coming to vForum is a place where all of those people that I know, past students, people that I do social media things with, are all in one place. This vForum, I've actually been to a session.
Wow.
I've been to 3 VMworlds in the last year and a bit, and I only went to 3 sessions across those VMworlds, so it's a big thing to be here.
1-to-1, eh?
Yeah, but it was really good. This session was Steve Herod. He's doing a series of things now which are much less formal, not marketing oriented. So he actually opened this one with a session of history, of VMware history, which was really interesting.
Wow, okay.
And then went on to a format that he's been doing recently of the open question and answer. Just ask me anything and I'll try and answer. And you've got to be pretty brave to be in Steve Herod's position and say, ask me anything in this public forum with only 400 people.
Right.
It was a pretty cool session.
Yeah, because we had like there was a thing going on yesterday with all the VCDXs, the V experts,
and the V champions,
and the V champions and the Vmworld leaders,
yeah.
which are some of them are V experts already. But yeah, and that was again, a similar thing where it was an open mic sort of thing. So I guess that's the world we live in now with social media, isn't it? A lot of these people who previously have held senior positions have become a lot more accessible.
Yeah, it's been really good to see that change. Understanding the social media engagement model.
Getting the story. Yeah,
it's not the marketing message. You can't put this marketing message on social media because people just won't listen.
I think that engagement's shifting a bit as well, though, isn't it? But hey, look. I had a chance to go to VMworld for the first time for myself this year, and I'd like to extend my thanks to you, Alastair, as well, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have had somewhere to stay.
Well, I was in the same situation last year, so it was my pleasure to be able to help you.
Well, I hope I've paid it back this time, because I've actually done that for somebody at vForum this year as well. So that's been,
and that's the way the community works. You pay it forward.
I hope that the chain will continue and it will follow on, sort of thing. So, but look, what I really wanted to ask, there was so many good things going on there, but for you, what was the most exciting announcement at VMworld, and also if there was a single piece of tech that was discussed, that you'd be passionate about, what would it be? I know it's hard to put it on one thing, but
it is, and my perspective again as a trainer is a little different from being an end user. So I get excited about things that I can run in a relatively small lab rather than things that are only useful if you've got 400 hosts and 10,000 VMs. So oddly though, one of the ones that I'm really like the look of and think is going to be quite good is Winova. What was in the end user compute keynotes through the second keynote throughout all of the conferences. When the initial purchase of Winova came through, it looked like the positioning was this is going to be for the things that you can't run in VDI. But definitely the keynotes were showing you the use of Winova as a way of dealing with your single image management for VDI. And that, I think, when I looked at what the product does, that was what to me seemed the most sensible way of using the product. It seems a really good way of having a dedicated virtual machine for a user without having to do the single instance storage and the ongoing unique object management that's inherent in that dedicated image. And I'm an end user compute guy. I've been working with end user compute since before it had that name.
So back in the Citrix days, and
it was my specialisation when I moved to the UK in the late 90s. I went there on the back of having early Citrix certification back on WinFrame 1.7.
Wow, 1.7,
And that's WinFrame as well. It was the version that ran on Windows 3.51 modified code.
Oh man.
Yes, that's why I've got no hair left. I've been doing this stuff since it was very painful, and it's a little less painful these days.
Yeah, cool. So hey, look, tell me about your commitment. I mean, obviously we talked a bit about the stuff that you've been doing in the community, but tell us about your commitment for supporting the VMware user group and the community, the IT community as a whole. So
that's an interesting challenge, because people assume because I'm active in social media and that I hang out with you quite a bit that I'm very involved in VMUG. I've never been to a single VMUG meeting.
Well, we'll have to change that, won't we?
Well, the thing is that you have to schedule them for when I'm in the city teaching, and they can't start before 5 o'clock. That combination tends to be where it falls down. So I'll often be in the city the week before the VMUG meeting or the week after the VMUG, and the week of the VMUG I'm going to be somewhere else.
Well, hopefully, you will get you to the all-day user conference, and that can be set the precedence, mate. It can, yeah. So
yes. And we have regional VMUGs in New Zealand. Most of my work is in New Zealand. There is a reasonably active VMUG in Wellington that's running down there and supported out of a government department down there. And I always look at the schedule and think, well, wouldn't it be nice if that was a week that I was working down there? And week after next in Melbourne, are you running a VMUG
29th of November, that's right, I didn't want to mention any dates because I don't know when I'm going to put this video out, but hey, it's there now.
Well, I may well come to that one because I'm just telling you for the first time, I'm in Melbourne that week.
Oh, that's great.
So,
brilliant.
That could be my
That's going to
first.
be a special one, it is as well, because we're going to be at the VMware offices, and then we've got a kind benefactor that's going to sponsor VBeers.
VBeers is always a good
at
thing.
the Belgian Beer Cafe, which is just around the corner.
Right.
So I better get this one out before.
You had. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's like me talking about the party and saying, sorry guys, you missed it. It was 2 days ago.
I think I've done that on the podcast before, you know, say, I think I did with the Poland Vmworld. Oh yeah, they're on the 26th. Oh, we're on the 28th. Oh shit, never mind. So,
and that means it's already the 27th in Poland.
yeah, we're a day after, aren't we? That's true, yeah. So, hey, look, I've been asking this question to everybody, mate, and I'm kind of tired of asking it as well to some degree, but hey, look, what is your opinion on a software-defined data center? And look, how does it compare to compute? And, you know, like, how's it going to affect our ecosystem, you know, particularly around the network and storage layers?
Shall I just get my buzzword bingo card out and we can
I like to get them all
these
in
numbers.
one set of questions, mate. Do you know what I mean?
You can line across and a line up in one sentence, and you win.
Look, I've been saying that the software-defined data center is kind of like it's cloud for IT professionals. You know, there's a bit more. There's a bit more to it. You know, there's a bit more description to it. So, but hey, look, I don't want to steal your thunder, please.
Well,
let us know what you reckon.
Have you noticed a little cynicism that when we hear the marketing words, it starts to sort of just glaze over for me, and the phrase means nothing until you've actually got a product that does something. What I'm increasingly realizing is that I'm an infrastructure guy. I'm working with the actual hardware. Show me what it means when I use it. Don't give me the management words. And that's yet to arrive. So the software-defined data center is still, here's a set of concepts we're going to deliver. It becomes really important to me when we actually have to go out and build that software-defined data center for a customer and when it actually ships. So when we get there, then I'll be interested in it. But it's like, you know, another buzzword like cloud was last year. I'm sure that vForum next year, it's going to be your software-defined data center, insert tagline here. And the reality is going to be interesting and it'll be useful. And quite probably it will scale down into the kind of sizes that are relevant in our region. A lot of the sort of positioning of what people are doing with software-defined X at the moment is enterprise cloud customers that are simply such a huge scale. They have no relevance to our ANZ market with our, you know, a few million people. New Zealand, the entire population is less than the population of Phoenix, Arizona, and so you know, scale is a different thing. It's a promise for a future, and you've got to think of a future. Somebody's got to think of a future, but most of us have got to deliver a reality today, which is not yet that software-defined data center.
I think, you know, putting it into software, it does mean that, you know, you look at like labs, you know, we were talking about labs before and about how that's changed, how like you can use commodity hardware now. It's not about the hardware anymore, and so that means that everybody can have access to the tools more. Do you know what I mean? Like, there has been an impact on it, you know. Like, and I know, you know, it's been happening in the compute space, and more it's going to happen in these other areas. But yeah, I think there is some benefits even for like, you know, smaller scale environments.
And that's what we'll see over time is that value proposition for smaller customers will become more concrete, the ability to deliver something. Things that are currently software-defined data center, you look at Nicira, if you implement it now, is essentially a consulting engagement to implement. And that doesn't scale down to the smaller customers. When it's packaged software which does a well-known set of features, if we can say here is how you deploy it out. You don't need to get a consultant in from outside of your solution provider, right? You don't need to get the vendor involved. That's when it hits the scale of markets that we are here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that's good. Some good points there, Alastair. Some good points there. Appreciate it. Yeah. Tell us about your home lab, mate. Yeah.
So my home lab.
Do you get your hands on the tools, mate?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I am still the geek who likes to play with the toys. So my home lab has had many evolutions. At its largest, it was a C-class blade enclosure in a shed at home. So I talk about a data shed. I don't have a data center, I have a data shed. And that C-class blade enclosure is there, and I had yesterday a rumor that I might get some more gear to go back in it.
Wow.
And then I start thinking about how much I want to pay the hosting provider that currently I've got some co-load service. I've got two U-Computes co-load at the moment. I have a relatively old 24 gig of RAM i7 with an SSD and hardware SATA RAID controller in it. that is my ESX server, and that's getting to the point where I need to replace it. And the really good thing is I can replace it now with a new motherboard that's again an i7, but it's got eight DIMM slots, and I can put eight gig DIMMs in it.
That makes a big
and that will cost me less than I paid for the 24 gigs of RAM that it's currently got in it.
Yeah.
So that's one of my coming upgrades. The other machine that I have in my lab is another i7 machine. It's 2U, but it's got 32 gigs of RAM. I bought it this year for Autolab development. So that machine runs Windows 7. It's got a Teradici host card in it. So this is the card that plugs into the video out on the video adapter inside the machine, and then lets me use VMware View to connect in and take control of the Windows 7 machine. So for Autolab development, I've moved away from using my 3.5-year-old laptop that I built the original Autolab on, and I've moved towards using this cloud-based, or this co-load.
You are your
machine.
own service provider.
I am. So I have a moderate lab now. It's only 2 machines, but it is a reasonably powerful set of kit. I use Autolab for anything that I need to do that might be damaging. So what I know people have trouble with is building a lab and then building out something like vShield. You start deploying vShield on your lab, and you can very easily hang yourself by not quite understanding what the instructions mean. And I know people have done this and had to completely rebuild their labs. Nested ESX Autolab is a great way of deploying out these relatively high-risk products. And knowing that if it falls apart, you can hit the delete button and redeploy, and it's not going to be another week to build it.
So you see that there's going to be more integration of products within Autolab then? You know, like I know there's mention of vCloud. What about?
So vCloud's in. View 5 is in. The vSphere 5.1 release we are testing at the moment. And it's a long process now to test because there's so much in it. Because we've also got Veeam, who've been a sponsor for the Autolab, and who allowed me to make the decision to both go to Vmworld and buy my new i7 machine for the development. Was their sponsorship that stopped me from having to choose between the two. We've got Veeam products in the Autolab, so there's a lot in there. It started out, it was just 6 virtual machines. It's now about 9 virtual machines. And sort of futures on it, I'd like to get Site Recovery Manager in there, which then gives you another vCenter domain controller ESX. It doubles again the number of machines that are involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'd be very interested in. So
and
as a user.
Yeah, and we'd need replicated storage as well, because I don't just want to do vSphere replication on it. And vSphere replication is problematic because it requires a nested virtual machine, which is 64-bit, and not everybody's lab supports nested 64-bit
there's still some hardware constraints around that, isn't there?
And I'm now on a dilemma. I've got to replace my 3.5-year-old laptop before it completely fails. Do I buy another machine that I could run Autolab on, or do I buy something smaller and lighter that's going to be a good client for connecting back into my central lab? And I keep oscillating between the two, and I think the sensible move is actually to commit to my centralized lab and buy something small and light that's compatible with my travel.
But then you're always held hostage then to internet connectivity and the capability of that, particularly in the ANZ region as well, which isn't right now fantastic, but may change in the future. It's gotten much better
over the last couple of years. So one of the benefits for me has been moving from having my access into my lab over an ADSL link to having my lab now in my ISP, is that I've got much greater bandwidth, bandwidth out of my lab that wasn't there previously.
Yeah, it's a good point, Well, interesting, mate. Interesting. Look, just last question now, we're just going to wrap up, but I wanted to talk more about the V Brown bag, and like I did a similar thing with Nick before, Nick Marshall, just around Autolab. If you could tell us about some futures, mate, like some on about signing an NDA agreement or something like that,
certainly.
Getting some information
I'll get everybody to sign the NDA now. What you need to understand about V Brown Bag is that organising it is like herding cats. And the cats in particular I'm thinking of is Damien and Cody, who are both great people that I love spending time with. and to be fair, Josh and Nick and I are probably as bad as heading off in directions. So we're going to get much more structured around organising, but we are committed to continuing to make the vBrown Bag more awesome. So Nick has said that for the year we're on about 50,000 downloads of vBrown Bag sessions.
Wow, that is phenomenal, mate.
This a large part of it is due to Nick's work of getting it on iTunes and getting our feed out for it. And then the huge profile that we've gotten for vBrown Bag out of the two Vmworlds. Now, last at Vmworld in San Francisco, we did the vBrown Bag swag bag of awesome, which had a whole heap of useful stuff in it.
It was awesome, mate. Yeah. I just remember the energy drinks, mate. They were pretty good. They were pretty good, mate.
They were pretty popular. So that was our big thing, and I have to say that assembling those bags, we just kept looking at each other and giggling the craziness of what we were doing, because this thing had been organised at fairly short notice. Almost entirely by email without a particular coordination or organisation, yet it all came together. And that seems to be the way vBrown Bag works. I know that we're repeating the end of year giveaway that vBrown Bag ran last year. So last year vBrown Bag gave away a home lab.
Oh, wow.
And I can't break the confidences yet, but I believe we are going to have some pretty awesome giveaways this year.
You heard it here first.
We're certainly working hard on finding things that are more awesome. And the plan for next year is to continue and expand the awesome. Of course, we've got the Europe edition of the vBrown Bag has started up with Greg
Robertson
and Ian Timmerman.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's great to see, because although the APAC podcast runs in a time that's easy for attendance in Europe, it's not necessarily as convenient. We run to the evening in the APJ region, or afternoon in Japan, and it's early morning in Europe.
Yeah, I found that with the APAC virtual podcast, similar thing. We catch the UK guys, but the US guys are just not.
The US guys
they're
are
sleeping soundly.
Yeah, and that's the same for the APAC edition of the vBrown Bag. You get people further west from you can attend, but people to your east cannot. And so we will find it very difficult to get to the European, to the EMEA edition of the Brown Bag, whereas we can attend the US one. So the global reach is useful. It's also really useful to have somebody presenting you technical content in your own idiom, in your own way of speaking, in a local accent. Because that part of the point about vBrown Bag is to help you to be motivated to study these things, and if people around you are studying and excited about these things, it helps you to be motivated. So absolutely awesome that the guys have started up in the era, and we're global, baby. All we've got to do is start getting a Cantonese or a Mandarin edition.
Non-English,
get a non-English.
Now that'd be interesting.
Organisation would then be a total exercise in herding cats, because at least so far everybody is fluent in English.
Common denominator, wow. Hey, look, Alastair, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I hope to have a catch up with you again soon.
In 2 weeks' time, I reckon.
Yeah, that'll be great, mate. Thank you. Thanks, mate.